Hi everyone. Today finally I got a chance to paint. I worked on some Calla Lilies, and in this you'll see when I start off the background is completely a different color. And once I started trying to paint in flowers, I just kept adding more white, more white, more white, more white, and my flowers weren't looking white. Oh, my problem was that my background was too light. So I paint over the background in the end to the black. So you can skip the first background, or you can paint it in, and then where your black doesn't totally cover, you would have like the shadows of that color coming through. It's completely up to you. You can, just do the flowers and wait till the end to do the black, or put in the first layer of color, paint your flowers, and then go around them and paint them black. But the black really made these little babies just pop right out. Now I used, for the first background, yellow ochre and titanium white. If you choose not to paint that, you'll still need a tiny little bit of yellow ochre to do the little pollen thingies, stamen, I'm not sure exactly what it's called. That's the only place you're going to need yellow ochre, if you don't put it on your background to begin with. So yellow ochre, titanium white. I use Hansa Yellow, but you can use Calla Yellow, Sap Green, a little bit of Raynes gray or paynes gray to do the shadows of the flowers, and then I introduce black in the end for the background. So if you don't do the under background that I covered, well, you still need all the colors. So you need sap green, titanium white, those are your two main colors, the teeniest, tiniest little bit of Raynes gray, and black. Sap green, titanium white, Raynes gray, Hansa Yellow or Calla Yellow, and black. So you have 4 to 5 colors if you count black and white as colors. I got a whole bunch of the brushes setting in my water. I started off with a bigger bristle brush to paint the original background. You can or can't have that. Basically, if you have a brite, an angle, and a detail brush, a small detail brush, you're in good shape. You'll see me using a mop brush. You don't need it because that was on the first background. And then of course I dirtied other brushes because using the mop brush got hairs in the paint, and then I had to use this other brush to pick the hairs out of the paint. But you won't need that. You need a very small amount of brushes, the ones that you're comfortable with, and that's all you need. So let's go ahead and get started. What I did is I went online and looked at pictures of some flowers, and I practiced drawing them first. You see my little mess. So I just looked at the shape of the flower, and I drew it on the paper, and I did it a couple of different ways, trying to figure what I was going to do. And they're very simple to draw. Very, very simple. And let's go to it. Okay, so this is the part you can skip if you would like to. But if you want to do it, I'm mixing yellow ochre and white, mixing it on the canvas. I paint a small area, then I'm taking the mop brush and blending out the edges to kind of like blur it so there aren't any harsh edges between the color shifts. And as the mop brush loses hair, and they all do, I'm picking up a smaller stiff bristled brush and picking them out. But like I said, this is an unnecessary step that I realized much later into the painting, and you don't have to do this part if you don't want. But you can if you want the underpainting. Once your background has dried, if you painted it in, use a piece of chalk and draw in your Calla Lilies. Now, I'm trying to use white chalk. You can barely see it, but I start to struggle with this chalk because my background is not completely dry. I put a lot of paint on that background. And here you'll see me start to struggle with it. Now I'm trying to rub off the edges. It's still not working. So I'm going to grab a pencil and I'm going to pencil it in. And the pencil didn't really want to write on this because it was still wet. So make sure you let it dry completely. So I'm just putting in my shapes, looking at my practice drawings. And now I'm taking my titanium white with the tiniest little bit of the gray mixed in with it, the Raynes gray. And I outlined my shape first, and I'm trying to use my brush direction to define where the different parts of the petals are to this flower. And I was using just a flat or brite half-inch. A number 10. Simply Simmons number 10. Actually, it was called a shader, one of them. And one of them was called a flat. But I keep working on it, changing the value of the white with the Raynes gray, trying to put some shadow in place, going back and adjusting it with just regular white, and I keep fussing and fussing and fussing with it. I think there I decided my line was a little thick, stretched it out to the edge to let it end to a point. On the second flower, I'm putting the center where the hole is going to be, not really the hole, but you know, the center where that little stamen thing sticks out. That's kind of in shadow. Trying to lighten it up a little bit. Just painting in my shape and trying to define where the shadows are. Still using that flat brush. On to the third flower, same thing. Filling in with the very ever so lightly tainted white with the Raynes gray. Adding that little shadow area. Trying to go in the direction that the petal would go. I just keep working on it, adding more white, adding more of my gray tone, trying to make the shadows, trying to define the edges of the petals. Working on the shadow. It's a little dark, but I'll go back in and work some blending magic with some white. I just keep bouncing around the canvas from flower to flower. And by the way, I'm using a 9x12 canvas paper. And soon here is when I'll realize, why do I keep having to add all this white and I'm not getting the look that I want? So I'm going to try darkening my shadows, which isn't the problem. The background is the problem. Now if you painted it in, you can see now why my color choice was a big mistake. If these were darker flowers, it would have been perfectly fine, but because I chose to do white and yellow, this background just isn't cutting it. I just keep adding white, keep building up those layers, keep trying to blend it in, make it look as much of a smooth transition from the grays, the lights to the darks, the gray to the white. I just keep working at it. So now I've decided to let the flowers dry a little and work on the stems. I'm using Sap Green, and I think I had a little bit of white left on my brush there. So I'm brushing in some more green over top of it, just blending it into it, going back and touching some of my Hansa Yellow into it to give it highlight areas while it's still wet. It just blends nicely when it's wet. So I'll work on all three stems and the kind of bulb part where the flower attaches to the stem. You know, trying to make it look like it's naturally attached and not just sat on top of it. Now, because we're going to paint over this background, don't worry about if you get too fat with your stem, because you can go back and adjust the shape and clean up the edges. So now I'm adding some leaves, and you see me keep going over it because my brush I'm not using a big brush, and it's really not the proper type of brush. Being a flat versus a brite, you know, it doesn't hold as much paint, so it's drying out on me. So I'd have to keep working on it. And of course I'm going back in and adding the yellows in for the highlights to make it a lighter green and doing the wet on wet blending. But it's perfectly fine to dry brush it in too. Last leaf. This one's not bent, it's just kind of sticking up in the middle there. Adding yellow for the highlight. working on that white again. Still trying to make it pop. Still haven't figured out it's not the flower, it's the background. But I will. I'll figure it out. I apologize about the lighting. It seems that when I paint at night, there's more of a glare than when the sun is also coming in through the windows in the daytime. And it's a little difficult here for you to see what's really happening because of the glare. But at the end, I have some still shots, so you'll be able to take a good look. So, you know, hang out to the end, or you can jump forward to the end if you would like. This is the Hansa Yellow. I'm just painting in the like tubular shape of the stamen. That one just has a little piece poking out. I'll have to do a couple of coats because, as we know, yellow is very transparent, but this particular yellow isn't quite as transparent as the cadmium yellow. Adding just a touch to the bottom, to the very tips of the flower, I'll put a little in. Then I come back and blend some white into it to lighten it up because it really stood out more than I wanted it to. Plus it helps to give it a smoother transition. So I'm still not quite getting the effect that I wanted for like the rollover of the flower petal there and where the shadows are. So I'm using a very fine, small detail brush and putting in a very thin line of a slightly darker mix of the Raynes gray and the titanium white. And then I will come back with some white and soften it up so it's not quite such a harsh line, so it's not so cartoony looking. So I'm using this teeny tiny ratty little brush that's been abused so badly it's all frayed out, and I'm just tapping in the tiniest little bit of, actually no, I'm repainting the yellow, giving it a second coat. But I will be tapping in yellow ochre to give it shadow with this little teeny tiny frayed brush eventually. I just lost track where I was at. Now I am again trying to build that white, and I just keep going, trying to blend it, make that shadow transition smoother, trying to thin out that dark line that I put in, I just keep working at it till I get it to where I like it. Now I'm tapping in the yellow ochre for the shadow to help give that stamen some dimension, and I'm doing it on the left side of all three of them. And then the flower that is on the left, I decided I was a little dark, so I tapped some Hansa Yellow over top of it to tone it down just a little bit. I just thought I was a little too heavy on it. So don't be afraid to make mistakes, because acrylics are wonderful. You can go back and fix them. So I finally made up my mind. It's the background, and I'm painting it in black. I took a little break, and I was sitting and I was looking at it, and I was trying to decide, do I want it blue? A dark blue would have made it pop real nicely too. But then I was afraid, because I used the yellow ochre, that I would end up with a green background, and I didn't want it green. So I said, let's just do black. And if you watch the progress of this being painted in with the black, these flowers are just going to jump right off the canvas. So, and now is my opportunity that I can clean up and smooth out my edges. If I want to change the shape of a flower or one of the leaves or the stems a little, I can do that too. So on this one, I got a little carried away, and I'm going to grab a different brush, a clean one, with some clean water. And because my green is dry, I can just like wash that right off with the brush. And then, of course, my hand slipped and I smeared it some more, so I had to work on that one a little bit. But because that was dry, I let it dry while I thought about what color I wanted. I was able to clean up my mistake. See, even the color looks so much better when I lifted that canvas up because of the glare of the lighting. But it's just amazing if, when you're working with white, if your darks aren't right, it doesn't matter how many layers of white you put on, you're never going to see your white. It's just not going to do what you want it to do. So I would definitely say white flowers need a really super dark background of some sort. Whether it's blue, black, red, whatever, but a dark color background. I mean, just look at how these flowers are popping out. The black just made all the difference in the world. And I am using a flat when I go along the edge of the stem. I'm like using the chisel edge and trying to get a nice smooth line. Then I go back in and like pull it away from the stem so that it doesn't look like I drew a line around it. I always prefer painting my background in first, but painting it black, it just wouldn't have happened. The black, you definitely got to go around, unless you want to put a million layers of white. What a difference. Now I'm just taking some green and kind of touching up where I got a little carried away with the black that I didn't notice and didn't clean up right away. And then I'll add some yellow in to blend it some and make it not look like it's chunked. And I'm just using my little teeny tiny detail brush that I have, and I mean it's teeny tiny. Probably has about 6 brush hairs in it. Okay, we've reached the end. These are the still shots. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you give this painting a try. And if you would like to share your work, we do have a Facebook group page that you can join and share your work with us. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful time painting.